From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. In China's recently adopted recommendations for the formulating of the 15th five-year plan, the emphasis on enhancing scientific and technological self-reliance and strength once again ignited people's imagination about the country's future. Meanwhile, a new article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences presents compelling evidence that Chinese researchers are playing an increasingly important role, even leadership role, in international science collaboration nowadays, after analyzing nearly 6 million papers, as well as their continued momentum amid fierce competition with the United States. So, how should we interpret China's growing influence in global science? How has China done right, or what has China done right, rather, to reach this point? And how can China and the United States, the two largest powers in scientific research, coexist and collaborate to advance global scientific progress? To explore these questions, we're joined today from Durham, North Carolina by Denis Simon, non-resident fellow at Quincy Institute, visiting professor in the Asian Pacific Studies Institute at Duke University. From Beijing, we have Andy Mok, senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and Gai Keke, professor at the School of AI, Beijing Institute of Technology. Gentlemen, welcome to this program. Let me start with you, Denis. My editors, our team, have sent you this very important findings, analyzing 6 million papers, analyzing global scientific leadership. What are your takeaway from this paper? Where do you think this paper put China is in the ranks of today's scientific and science leadership?
Well, it's very clear that in addition to increasing its spending on R&D and rebuilding its infrastructure, Chinese scientists now basically are providing a lot of the intellectual capital that is helping to drive the cutting edge of scientific research. And this places them quite often in a leadership role on these trans-border teams that now have become the major source of new innovation and scientific discovery.
I mean, what are the relative strengths of China and what are the relative weaknesses? I mean, if you look at the applications, be it EVs or smartphone apps or large language models, China have churned out a whole lot of them. But what about when it comes to basic research at the origin of scientific findings? How would you compare China's strength versus its weaknesses?
So in the past, much of the research, basic research being done in China was what we might call derivative research. That kind of came from what was going on elsewhere in the world, and the Chinese scientific community basically plugged into that. That's no longer the case. Now China is providing a leadership role in helping to design, to structure, and to lay out these new projects. And thus they've become part of the mainstream now of international scientific and technological cooperation. China has gone from being a marginal player on the periphery of international scientific and technological affairs now to being a core player. And that is a big change in the game in terms of as we project out for the next 20 or 25 years. Clearly, China is going to be a major player, and it is going to shape the focus of where research is headed in the coming years.
Andy, did this paper's findings confirm any of your observations of the Chinese scientific scene? What are your takeaway from this paper?
So I think that these results, in some sense, are not unexpected, but certainly it's exciting to see formal recognition of this. And you know, how I would describe what's going on is that Chinese scientists have always played a vital role at the frontiers of research and development. However, they traditionally have been in a contributing role, meaning especially a lot of the technical subtasks of research have been given to Chinese researchers. And now they've moved to the coordination phase, meaning they are principal investigators, they are managing, coordinating cutting edge research. And this matters, of course, because of the results themselves. But why it's also very, very important from a structural perspective is that you only become a good leader through leadership experience. So in the past, with Chinese researchers largely relegated to supporting, contributing roles, they did not have many opportunities to develop as scientific research leaders. And today, again, as leaders, coordinators, principal investigators, they are gaining that experience. And I think this provides the foundation for the next stage of China's evolution as a global scientific power. And I'm sure we'll explore more the implications of that and what comes next. But for me, I'm not particularly surprised to see this since I've been following this field for literally decades. But it is very exciting to see formal recognition of this.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we ask a Chinese scientist about this evolution in science and technological innovation when it comes to China's ascent in the world? Professor Gai, you're one of China's leading young scientists. How do you see the Chinese researchers, coming of age in many categories, now leading in many on the world stage? How has China's education system help nurture this generation of scientific and scientific talents, in your opinion?
Well, thank you, Wang Guan. First of all, from this paper, I believe that cooperation between China and the US is still mutually beneficial. Cooperation in science and technology is a core component of international cooperation and something we need to address. So this may involve the design of a new cooperation mechanism and the development of a new cooperation platform, which are aspects worth discussing. Next, I believe that technological development is a very complex process. So it is very difficult to say that any one person or organization is leading scientific development in a particular field. In recent years, actually, we have made a lot of technological breakthroughs in many areas. So our country's support for young scientists is multidimensional. As we know, a very important point is that the country's support for extensive exchanges among scholars, which also provides a foundation for the development of multiple technological paths. In my experience, like my colleagues and I have been working on a lot of projects and that are supported by our country. Some of them supported by enterprises. I think most of the projects are problem-oriented. We do have done a lot of work in practical applications. We solve the problems on ground. So I think this is very important because nowadays we have a lot of opportunities and platforms for scholars to exchange their ideas. Then we found a lot of opportunities either locally or globally. So for us, we actually look forward to more opportunities to communicate with foreign colleagues to see if there are any opportunities for collaborations in the future. A more trustful environment is also important for future global technological cooperation, because nowadays in some cases the data are very sensitive, so we want to keep the data locally. So this is one of the requirements for the technology development. We need to consider this issue from the perspective of the technology. We need a technical solution to establishing the collaborative platform. Thank you.
Simon, let me ask you about the situation in the United States. According to American Association for Advancement of Science, under President Donald Trump's new budget for 2026 fiscal year, U.S. federal funding for basic research would fall by more than 1/3, from $45 billion to $30 billion. A Nature survey also found that among 1,600 scientists, over 1,200 are considering leaving the United States due to these disruptions and others. How do you see these policy shifts? I mean, what impacts are they having on America's science community?
Well, what's happening is nothing short of mind-boggling. it really is a shock to our system when we are looking out at the scientific landscape and we are looking to ensure that U.S. has a leadership position. It defies the imagination to understand what is the purpose of cutting back substantially on the monies that are available for advanced research. Hardly anyone can explain it. Now, that's not to say that there has always been a need to fix some of the problems in the system. Money is not always used effectively. The bureaucracy sometimes, requires too much reporting and excessive burdens on the scientists, and other things like that. But that's far different than what is happening actually today. And I think that this is going to do some irreparable damage to the United States. What's really important, it's not going to leave the United States any longer as the partner of choice in these cross-border collaborations. It used to be that U.S. participation, either as a lead player or as one of the key players, was almost a given. But these days, I think with the rise of scientific powers like China, India, Brazil, Mexico, etc., in addition to South Korea and Japan, we're seeing now increased opportunities for cross-border transnational collaboration in which the United States need not necessarily be the central player. And I think that would be highly unfortunate for both the United States, but also for the rest of the world, because they would lose the contributions from U.S. Scientific creativity and ingenuity when it comes to problem solving and critical thinking about the future.
What do you make of the current U.S. administration's policies of downsizing scientific and research institutions, having all these unfriendly remarks towards American higher learning institutions and towards certain categories of foreign students? Andy.
Oh, Juan, the term I would use is strategic coherence. And the U.S. certainly in this area is strategically incoherent because the administration talks about the importance of making America great again, reindustrialization, leading in science and technology. But at the policy level, certainly, from the most senior levels, there's a joke in Silicon Valley that the valley was built on the IC, not the integrated circuit, but Indians and Chinese. So it's long been recognized that, unfortunately, that domestically, kids generally struggle. Of course, not everyone, but that the real driver of technological innovation have been immigrants, especially from places like India and China. Now, of course, with the China initiative under the Biden administration, making many Chinese scientists feel very unwelcome, to the Trump administration now targeting H-1B visa holders, et cetera, again, is strategically incoherent by undermining, as you were saying, the very pillars of what makes the U.S. a technological superpower, the openness, the ability to attract top minds from all around the world. At the same time, China is pursuing the exact opposite strategy of strategic coherence, meaning that at the senior levels, offering very attractive packages, providing labs, human support, scientists, research assistants to support top researchers, to the K visa to attract young STEM talent. And again, this is aligned with China's goal, again, of 2035, 2049. So again, I think to me, it's really a story of strategic incoherence versus strategic coherence when it comes to science and technology, research and development.
Mr. Gai, you've been the champion of, China and the U.S. and China and the world having closer collaboration. You're a scientist, science knows no borders. But what about the current reality of some institutions and societies shutting China out of this global scientific collaboration loop? And on the other hand, China has been working very closely with the Global South, with the BRICS, with the SCO countries, or the BRI countries, the Belt and Road Initiative, to advance its own agendas, pushing for this community of science and innovation. Professor Gai.
I think the United States has a very strong technological and economic foundation, so I don't think the funding cuts will have a significant impact on its technological development. Moreover, international cooperation is a crucial pathway to technological advancement. So we should not draw conclusions solely based on the U.S. Investment plan. I believe that's a more equitable and open platform for collaborative research is an issue we should focus on in the future. We actually hope to obtain a relaxed, collaborative environment that provides sufficient conditions for cutting-edge research in the future. Like current achievements made by China is due to the efforts of the Chinese researchers and accumulation of achievements by generation of scientists over a long period. So this process is actually supported by our government. For sure, like most technological advancements rely on cutting edge exploration. The cooperation is a catalyst, but absence of cooperation does not mean that technological progress is impossible.
Here we spoke with James Evans from Chicago, co-author of Shifting Power Asymmetries in Scientific Teams Reveal China's Rising Leadership in Global Science. That is published in PNAS, and Max Palevsky, professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of Chicago. He shared with us his interpretation of the findings and his views on how competition in science and technology between China and the United States is evolving. Professor Evans, in your recent PNAS paper, you and your co-authors analyzed nearly 6 million papers to trace shifting patterns of global scientific leadership. The study highlights China's growing ability to organize international research, set agendas, integrate resources, and sustain leadership at some categories, even amid decoupling pressures, of course. Now, in your view, what does this reveal about the rise of China's influence or even leadership, if you would agree with that word, in today's global scientific landscape?
Well, I think since 1996, China has invested in the Western education, European and US education of its scientists. And from that time, it has dramatically, linearly increased in the global impact of the science that it produces. With a rising commitment to science, that also means there are more opportunities for scientists in China, which means, I would say, people with better native capacities are drawn to science. And so basically, there are more scientists that are increasingly trained with greater opportunities, which means even better people within the Chinese context are incentivized to get involved in science. So this has been associated with just a rise in really great Chinese trained scientific minds who have been able to, through education and scholarly advance, to make contributions that are appreciated by the world. So I think it's really a testament to the massive rise of Chinese science over the last 30 years.
Your article notes that in several key frontier technologies, China is expected to reach parity with the United States in research strength in the near future, many of which are likely to mature during the 15th five-year plan period. What would such parity mean in practical terms? How can we feel it? I mean, how might intensifying China-US competition shape the future of global technological development?
I think that if China and the US continue in the intensity of their collaboration, then parity means that they're equally likely to lead on a research paper. And a research paper is equally likely to have Chinese and US leaders in it, that they're really playing equal roles. And one of the things that we found in other research that we did is in the area of artificial intelligence, that collaborations between Chinese and American scholars end up being the most impactful research on average, higher than both Chinese research alone and US research alone, because of complementarities to their focus, their background, their interests, and their skills. So I think it would be both a loss to China, a loss to the US, and a loss to world science and technological advance if there was a great decoupling. So one of the things that I've also found in other research, this was a PNAS paper from a few years ago where we looked at whether hierarchical or flat research projects were more innovative. And we found systematically using the same tool that we used in this study that flat teams where more people with more backgrounds were all involved in leadership, leading the paper, ended up being more associated with novelty, disruptive findings, breakthroughs that drove future scientific and technological attention. And so basically parity means that they're flatter collaborations between Chinese and American teams. And so that means we've built, a system that facilitates this kind of flat collaboration, which is the most likely to yield technological and scientific advance. So I think this is a moment where we have this, in some ways, precious asset that could be dismantled in some ways by decoupling strategy, either from China or the US.
Professor, your research notes that China expanded its academic leadership through the Belt and Road Initiative. How do you evaluate the role of such collaborations in strengthening China's global research networks and influence?
So this was the most surprising thing to me in the course of this research. I was not at all aware, and I think most people in the West were not aware that China was spending almost as much as it spends to send Chinese scholars abroad to the US, to Europe, to other countries, to the UK. It's spending almost as much doing those things as it is bringing non-Chinese scientists to China. So that represents, in some cases, in some years of the data, like 80% of the amount that it's spending to send Chinese scientists abroad. And those of us who live in the US and Europe and the UK, there are enormous numbers of Chinese scientists, the highest levels, but at all levels of the US academic system. I would say most master's programs related to kind of computational analysis are predominantly scholars of Chinese background, ancestry, or citizenship. And so that's a huge effect. So there are a ton of people from Central Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, especially, that are coming into China to be educated.
Decoupling has long been a heated topic amid China-US competition, yet despite Washington's restrictions, China continues to make breakthroughs from the DeepSeek model to Huawei's Ascend AI chip, showcasing growing capacity for independent innovation, indigenous innovation. Why have the United States' efforts to slow China's technological rise fallen short? From your perspective, what factors have sustained China's continued advancement?
DeepSeek really have begun to change the global perception of Chinese leadership. So I think before those things happened, earlier you asked about my motivation for doing this. Part of it is I have a long-standing set of collaborations and scholars in China that I admire and collaborate and work with and visit. But also I was tasked in the US with serving as the research director of the National Network for Critical Technology Assessment. And I remember in Washington, I was presenting work about the rise of Chinese science and scientists on the global stage. And there were many in leadership positions who simply did not believe it. They did not believe that Chinese scientists were producing insights that had major global impact. They mentioned, Chinese scientists are present at global computer science conferences, but their papers are not of the kind of leadership that people are attending to and really building on. And I think some of these innovations that you described really completely changed those assessments and opinions. So I think some of those striking events, technological events like DeepSeek's R1 model that really kind of opened reasoning models to global advance and participation because of the open source nature of the model. I think decoupling could be enormously harmful for global science and technology and for both China and the US. So for the US, from the US's perspective, if China decouples, which is to say they educate less Chinese scientists and they engage in less collaboration with Chinese scientists, there are two options. One is that those Chinese scientists spend more time with European and British collaborators where they're already in even more leadership position. So it would increase their global leadership position. The US does not have enough science and scientists to change Chinese leadership and access to technology and technological advance. And the fact that they're already effectively on parity means they have the expertise there. The second option is that Chinese scientists increasingly collaborate with just each other, as you say, self-sufficiency. And maybe they even begin to publish in Chinese language journals, which decreases their exposure to the West. And that makes Chinese science increasingly invisible or opaque to American scientists. So we're less aware of its developments and we're more likely to be surprised by its advances, which is not in US mid and long-term interests.
And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our news coverage continues. Bye and take care.